All my books are falling over. And I'm filming. Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So today's video is going to be my January wrap-up. All of the books that I read in the month of January. And January was a very unusual reading month for me. I read way more books than I typically do. I read 17 books for a total page count of 7,000 pages, which is way more than any month that I did in 2021. It's probably the most amount of pages I've ever read in a month. I have read more books than 17 though, because a few years ago when I got into Agatha Christie, I binged a lot of her books. So I think I read like 20 books in a month, but most of those were like 200-page Agatha Christie books. But yeah, 17 books, guys. This is crazy. I don't think I'll be able to replicate this in any other month this year, so yeah. This is uncharted territory for me. So of course, since I read 17 books, which is still mind-blowing, since I read 17 books, I have a lot to get to here, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So for this wrap-up, I'm going to start with my least favorite books and work my way up to my favorite books. And January was also crazy because I didn't read any bad books. Well, I had one DNF, but other than that, all of my books were at least 3 stars, and most of my books, more than half, were 4.5 or 5-star books, which is crazy. So I don't have this book with me, but I DNF'd The Whisper Man. I'd heard from some people that it was a pretty good thriller, but I just couldn't get in. I couldn't get into it, and I didn't like the writing style. It fell very flat for me. And when I started reading it, I realized that, oh yeah, I tried reading another one of the author's books. I think it was called The Shadows, and I DNF'd that book too. So I think it's just, I really don't like that writer's writing style, so I'm probably not going to read any more of his books. So yeah, The Whisper Man got a DNF for me. And now on to the books that I actually read, and probably my least favorite book, even though this wasn't a bad book by any means, will be Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. Now this book, I had heard from a lot of people that it was a fantastic first entry into a fantasy series, in that it's a trilogy, and that the first book is by far the best, and that the second and third books aren't as great as this book. So I was heavily anticipating this being like a new favorite fantasy read. But for me, like, it started out kind of weak. I wasn't really too invested. And then part 2 came around and I became a little more invested. But then as I got further and further into the book, I just realized that I didn't really get attached to a lot of the characters. Like, the main character is good, and then there's like one other character that I liked, and then there's a horse character that I actually really liked, because he's basically like a dick to everybody, which I kind of thought was funny. But other than that, this book just really didn't grip me at all. Like I said, I didn't get attached to the characters, and it was just it ended up being like a mad book. Like, it's not terrible by any means, and if you are interested in reading it, you definitely should try it out, because a lot of people love this book. It wasn't great though, and so yeah, I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. I have no plans on continuing with the series. And now on to my monthly Stephen Graham Jones book that I've been reading along with Evie from She Was Only Evie. Sadly enough, Zombie Sharks with Metal Teeth. Now, again, this is not a bad book by any means. I gave it 3.5 stars. It's a short story collection, and it's very short. And some of the short stories in here are extremely short. Like, we're talking like 2 pages, 3 to 4, 5 pages. Some of them are a little more long, like 10, 15 pages, but generally these short stories are very short. And while some of them were really good, I really enjoyed them, a lot of them fell flat for me, or they went way over my head, or I just didn't like them. So it was definitely a mixed bag for me. While there were some stellar short stories in here, a lot of them just fell flat for me, or like I said, went way over my head. And I was originally going to give this 4 stars because the ones that were really good were outstanding, and there's stuff that I'm going to want to go back and reread at some point. But the titular story, there's a short story in here called Zombie Sharks with Metal Teeth. And it's the longest story in here. And there's no fucking zombie sharks with metal teeth. And that really grinded my gears. And so I had to deduct half a star for that alone. So yeah, weird rant aside, 3.5 stars. A lot of the stories in here, like I said, were great, but a lot of them just fell flat for me. So 3.5 stars. And my other 3.5 star read for the month is Inside Out, A Personal History of Pink Floyd, written by Nick Mason, who is the drummer for Pink Floyd. He is, funny enough, the only member of Pink Floyd to play on every single one of their albums, which is pretty crazy. And I was interested in reading this because, I'm a drummer, if you didn't know, and Nick Mason is one of the most underrated drummers of all time, and he, like I said, he's played on every Pink Floyd album. And when you think of Pink Floyd, you don't necessarily think of the drums, but like I said, he's very underrated. And this was my first book of the year where I'm trying to read at least one music-related nonfiction book a month. So I thought this was going to be a really good one to start out with. But like I said, I only gave it 3.5 stars. I didn't absolutely love it. There was a lot in here that I was intrigued by, especially when Nick Mason went into detail about the recording of their albums and the recording of their music and little tidbits about random members of the band. But there was a lot in here that I felt was either just unnecessary or just information about random people that were kind of like somewhat related to the band that I ultimately didn't care about. Like, I feel like he could have cut out like at least 100 pages of just random information that just felt very unnecessary. But then again, the parts in this book that I liked, I really enjoyed. So this was ultimately a hard book to rate, but I'm going to go with 3.5 stars just because I did enjoy my time. But kind of the parts that I didn't care about, honestly, I kind of skimmed through. Like just random people. I'm like, who is this person? I don't care. But ultimately, it was a good book. So 3.5 stars. And then I have 2 books that I gave 4 stars. And then after that, it's all 4.5 and 5 stars. So, like I said, crazy month. But I'm going to go with The Long Walk by Stephen King. I gave this 4 stars, which really surprised me because if any of you guys have seen my, Stephen King ranking series, you know that I put this book very high on the list. I think just outside my top 10. If I were to redo the list, honestly, this book would be significantly lower. Because when I was doing that list, I remembered this book being 5 stars and absolutely loving it. The second time around, it was great. Like, I still gave it 4 stars, but I had some issues with it. I didn't connect with the characters the same way that I did the first time. I think because the first time I read this, I was much younger. I was still in college in my early 20s. And now reading it, I just didn't connect to the characters as much. So that was one reason. And then kind of the second reason is the ending. The ending just kind of comes out of nowhere and you're just like, it's not great. But I will admit, this has one of the best ending lines to any book ever. And that's kind of what saves it for me. Because the ending itself isn't terribly great, but that last line is awesome. So overall, It's definitely not a 5-star book for me anymore, but it's still great. Still one of the best Richard Bachman books. And yeah, I gave it 4 stars. The other 4-star book I had was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Now, I had heard mixed reviews about all of Riley Sager's books, especially Final Girls, which I think is his most famous. I've heard from horror fans that it's a terrible book, and then from non-horror fans that it's a great book. And I'm a horror fan, so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like it or not. But this book, just hearing people talk about it, had a lot going for it. It's, like a haunted house thing, and it has a story within a story in kind of non-linear formatting, which those check out a lot of boxes for me. So I was really hoping that this was going to be like an all-time favorite. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars, and it was really, really good up until the very ending, because the very ending kind of has like a couple of twists. But the initial twist, the one that I thought was going on, I thought that would have been an amazing twist to end with. But then the author kind of goes a step forward and has another twist, and I'm like, it's not as good as the first one. You should have stuck with the first one. But overall, I had a very good time with this book, and I am interested in reading more by Riley Sager. I don't know if I'll read Final Girls, because I don't know, but I'll definitely check out more of his stuff. But anyway, Home Before Dark was pretty good. I gave it 4 stars. All right, so the rest of the books are all 4.5 and 5-star reads, which is crazy because we still have 12 books left to talk about here. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into it. And all of these 4.5-star books are so different, and they would be incredibly hard to rank, so they're just in random order here, so I don't know which one I would consider my favorite. We're just going to go in the order that I have it stacked here. So we'll go with Blackstone Heart by Michael R. Fletcher. So Blackstone Heart is a dark fantasy novel, and the only thing I really knew going into it is that the main character had amnesia, and that he was trying to collect these shards that would help him remember his past. And I really enjoyed my time with this book. And not only just, reading it, but the audiobook for this was really cool, narrated by Michael R. Fletcher himself. And not only that, but this book has a lot of really cool pictures. Oh, well, I can't show you that one. Let's flip to another one. I can't show you that one either. Oh, crap. Let's try to find one that I can actually show you. All right, let's go with this one. Yeah, a lot of cool images in this book, and I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I really liked the main character. I liked his kind of story where he's trying to learn more about himself, and I liked the side characters, and I liked how dark it was. And it didn't really feel dark in the way that like something like Prince of Thorns for me read, where it just felt like, oh, he's being dark just for the sake of being dark. Like this was dark, but it felt like it had a purpose to it. And I really enjoyed my time with it. I thought the world building was really cool and very unique. It just had a lot going for it. And while it wasn't perfect, I did end up giving it 4.5 stars, and I will be continuing with the sequel, She Dreams in Blood, sometime in the next few months. So another 4.5-star read for me was Confessions by Kanae Minato. Not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but that's what I'm going with. And I had read her other book, Penance, and I liked that significantly less than this book. I gave that book probably 3.5 stars, whereas this book got 4.5 stars, and it was awesome. And it's written in kind of a similar way where, like, every chapter you get a different perspective and you learn another, like, groundbreaking piece of information that just, like, enhances the story even more. The main reason why I didn't get 5 stars is because that there's 6 chapters, and the first chapter starts out and it ends amazingly, and you're just like, what the hell? What the hell? And then the chapter immediately following that was just okay for me. But then the rest of the chapters were amazing also. So it had one kind of okay chapter, but the rest of the book was amazing. I gave it 4.5 stars, and just the reveals in this book were so good and so interesting and crazy and out there. The first chapter might be like one of the best first chapters like ever. Like the way that it's told and the way that it ends, you're just like, who would do that? I really enjoyed my time with this book, and I could see myself going back and rereading it in the future. And also the audiobook is really good, and it's told, it has different narrators for each perspective, which I think really enhanced the story. So yes, Confessions, amazing thriller book, 4.5 stars. The next 4.5 star book for me is a reread, and that would be The Devil's Only Friend by Dan Wells. And this is the 4th John Cleaver book, and it is the first book in the second trilogy. Now, I love the first trilogy. I reread those books recently and gave them all 5 stars. The second trilogy, the first time I read it, I liked it a little less than the first trilogy, and I think it's going to be the same this go around. Like, it's a good book, or it's a great book, actually, but it just doesn't quite compare to my love for the first trilogy. Now, I did like this a little bit more than the first time I read it. The first time I read it, I believe I gave it 4 stars. This time I gave it 4.5 stars. And it's a different story than the first trilogy. It's a little different. And of course, it's the 4th book in a series, so I can't talk too much about it or really explain why it's different. It's just different, not in a bad way, but in a different way. Oh, God. Anyway, I really enjoyed my time with this, and I'm anxious to get to books 5 and 6, because honestly, I really don't remember book 5 at all. I remembered a little bit about this book, but there was a lot that I was just like, oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah, that happened. So I'm having a fun time with it anyway. So The Devil's Only Friend, book 4 in John Cleaver, 4.5 stars. Another 4.5 star read for me would be Greenwriter by Kristen Britton, and this is a read-along that's going along on Josephina's channel, on Feeney Reads, and her Discord, and this is her favorite series of all time, and she was very excited to get a lot of people into the series. And I think for my 4-star predictions video, I predicted this was going to be 4 stars. I thought I would like it, but I wouldn't love it. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I had a terrific time. Reading it, I liked it a little bit more than I thought I would. This book was just a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. I had a blast. Reading it, a lot of the characters were very memorable and very great. I didn't give it 5 stars though, because sometimes the dialogue would be a little cheesy. Like, it's not like George R.R. Martin level, but you know, who is? And then also there was like a couple chapters where we get certain perspectives that I wasn't a huge fan of, but they were still serviceable. Mainly though, I liked the main character and her storyline. And like I said, this book was just so much fun, and the ending was crazy, and I was just like, what is going on? Like, I did not expect that for this book. So I'm very anxious to get to book 2 in February. I'm definitely continuing on with the read-along. And so yes, Greenwriter, 4.5 stars, very fun. And my last 4.5 star read almost got 5 stars, but not quite. I'll get into it. And that's The Passengers by John Mars. And literally the only thing I knew about this book is the blurb on the back. Yes. You're riding in your self-driving car when suddenly the doors lock, the route changes, and you have lost all control. Then a mysterious voice tells you, you are going to die. that's the only thing I knew. That's the only thing I needed to know. Because usually with thrillers, it's a good thing to not know a whole lot about it going in. And I really enjoyed my time. There was a few chapters at the beginning where you get a certain perspective where you're just like, how does this fit into the story? But then eventually her chapters got a lot better. And just, this book just had so many friggin' reveals after reveal of like the people who are in this crazy scenario. And I loved that. The only reason this got 4.5 instead of 5 stars, the ending went on a little long. It was very convoluted. It's, and obviously I can't talk about it too much because it's the ending. But like I said, it felt very convoluted. I wanted a more kind of concrete answer as to like what was going on and like who was doing this. And the author just kind of, like, the ending just felt very roundabout, just like, oh, this is happening. Oh, wait, no, this is happening. No, this is happening. And I was just like, just tell me what's going on. But, I'm sure a lot of people, love it and give this book 5 stars. But for me, I really enjoyed, like, the first, most of the book. And then the ending, it didn't fall flat because it was still fun to read. But at the same time, I was just like, really, really, come on. But anyway, I had a blast reading this. The Passengers, 4.5 stars. And then the rest of the book are 5-star reads, with the caveat that most of these books, besides one, are rereads. So, it makes sense that the books that I'm most wanting to reread would be 5-star books, right? I'm not going to reread a 3-star book. So yes, most of the books that I gave 5 stars this month, with the exception of one, which I'll talk about at the very end, I gave 5 stars. And most of them are by Stephen King. Yeah. So before I get into those, let me just quickly mention that we read a lot of short stories in Night Shift. Let me see if I can pick out which ones that we actually read. I don't remember. I'll insert them here. Like, we read these, and most of them were really good, including my all-time favorite Stephen King short story, which is Quitters, Inc. And I'm very glad that a lot of people really enjoyed it, and a lot of people are going to probably choose that as their favorite, I'm assuming, and that makes me very happy. I loved Quitters, Inc. And yes, we're having a very good time with Night Shift. We're going to wrap it up in February, and then, shameless plug, after Night Shift, we're going to start with Skeleton Crew on March 1st, and the first story in that is The Mist. And yeah, we're going to be reading Skeleton Crew, basically 1 to 2 short stories a week up until June. Yes, so if you're interested, come join the Bookish Drummer Discord and join Stephen King Short Story Book Club, where we talk about Stephen King short stories and have a blast doing so. I also reread The Gunslinger, which is the first Dark Tower novel, and The Dark Tower is probably my 3rd favorite series of all time, and this will be my 2nd time reading through the whole series. Basically what I'm doing is just reading 1 book a month. So in February, I'll be reading Drawing of the Three, which is my favorite Dark Tower novel. The Gunslinger, though, is almost a perfect read, or it's almost a perfect reread, rather, because the first time you read it can be a bit jarring. You don't really quite know what's happening. But the second time reading it, after finishing the whole series, it's very eye-opening. And this was actually my 3rd time reading it, and I, of course, loved it again. So, yep, not much to say. 5 stars. And then basically the rest of my Stephen King reading for the month of January was me catching up on all of the novellas that I have left to rank in my Stephen King novella ranking series. And yeah, I read a lot of novellas, including 3 of the novellas in different seasons. Now, I had read Shawshank. I buddy read that with my buddy Sharon, I think in December, or I don't remember when I read it. But obviously that was very good. And then I had 3 left to read: Apt Pupil, The Body, and The Breathing Method, which those, spoiler alert, those are all going to be very high on the list. And yeah, so different seasons. This is actually my 3rd favorite King book of all time. So yes, 5 stars. And then I read a couple of shorter King works that I consider novellas, such as The Colorado Kid, which technically I think he published it as a novel, but it's less than 200 pages and the audiobook is only like 3.5 hours long. I consider it more of a novella. And honestly, this is one of my favorite King stories, which is very, very unpopular. People do not like this book, but I really like it. Like, if you go on Goodreads, this is easily King's worst rated book. It's like 3.3, which is criminal in my mind. I really like it, but at the same time, I understand why people don't like it. I'll get more into it, in the ranking series, and I'm sure people will not be pleased with where I put this in my ranking. And then some more novellas. We have Gwendy's Button Box, which of course is fantastic. And I'm sorry about the book damage here. I tried to pull off a sticker, but it just like pulled off the cover. So, oh well, I got this used anyway. So, but yes, Gwendy's Button Box is definitely one of my favorite King novellas. And yep, you'll find out where it lies on the list sometime soon. And then my 4th favorite Stephen King book, If It Bleeds. Now, yes, 5 stars, obviously, and I love Stephen King novellas. And yes, a lot of these will also be very high up on the list. You'll see when those future episodes come out. I will say, spoiler alert, probably my least favorite in this collection is the title story, but I still love it. Yes, this, like I said, there's not too much to say because I'm going to save it all for the novella series. So yes, 5 stars, one of my all-time favorite King books. And then I also read A Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin, the 2nd book in A Song of Ice and Fire, my all-time favorite series. Even though the books are all 5 stars and they're all fantastic in my eyes, this might be my least favorite, which I'm kind of splitting hairs here because they're all great, including this book. But if I had to pick a least favorite, it might be this one. I don't know, but still, I loved it. I had a great time with it, and I read it really fast because I can just put the audiobook on at like 1.7 speed and just, phew, I flew through it. But yes, Clash of Kings, 5 stars, yeah. And now we get to my favorite book of the month, discluding rereads, of course. My favorite book that's new to me that I read in the month of January. I have a dedicated review for this book. I absolutely loved it. And that would be Project Hail Mary. One of the best sci-fi books I ever read. I did not expect to absolutely love this book because I read The Martian, and while I did enjoy it, that was more of a 4-star book. But I had heard from a lot of people that this was even better than The Martian. So I did have high hopes. And for most of this book, I was leaning more towards 4.5 stars. Because there was kind of a complaint that I had that I get a little bit more into detail on my spoiler video for this, my dedicated review for this, which I'll link down below if anyone's interested. I go into more detail about it there. But it was, like I said, it was more of a 4.5 star read because there was like one issue that was kind of a similar issue with The Martian. But then the author, I think it was like chapter 23, and like, boom, fixed it. It's exactly what I wanted, when I wanted it, and it was amazing. And then from there, it was a 5-star read. And then I was just waiting to see if it had a great ending. And the ending was perfect. And yes, definitely one of my all-time favorite science fiction novels of all time. I'm pretty sure this is a lock for my top 10 books of the year. I will be shocked if it's not in my top 10. So yes, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. 5 stars. All right, so those are all of the books that I managed to read in the month of January. 17 books, 7,000 pages. It's a lot, and there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to read that much in February or probably any other month of the year. But yeah, I had a blast reading them. And like I said, most of the books that I read were great. I had one DNF, but that's fine. The rest of the books were at least 3 stars though, so not really any bad reading this month. And like I said, most of them were 4.5 or 5-star reads. I mean, the 5-star reads, I kind of knew because a lot of those were rereads. Anyway, let me know what you guys thought of this video, and let me know if you guys have read any of these books and what you thought of them down below, whether you loved them, whether you hated them, whether you thought they were kind of meh, just a little meh, a little meh. Either way, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to chat with you about it. And what were your favorite books that you read in January? I'd love to know, and I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and the Book Astronomer Discord. And if you'd like to further support me, go check out my Patreon and see what that's about. Thank you so much for watching, and have a terrific day.